Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our recently rebranded podcast, The Global Talk. Many of you will have previously known our podcast as Scale Up Stateside, and this month is probably the last time I'm going to mention it, but that previous podcast was founded by PGC Group, and now this year, under our new brand of Workwell Global, we gave the podcast an upgrade and we've shifted our view to align with recruiting and doing business internationally. And actually, our guest today is going to be perfect in terms of how we make that shift. So I'll introduce him shortly. But if this is your first time listening, you are very welcome. If you've been a regular listener of our podcast, then thank you for coming back again. I'm Amy Davies. I'm the Managing Director of Workwell Global, and we specialise in supporting recruitment firms expand to international markets by providing employer of record and agent of record services for contractors and your clients. We can help you scale your contract recruitment business quickly and drive enterprise value at the same time, which is a topic that we are going to cover off today. But joining me on our podcast is a very special guest, and there's been a lot of hype about this guest and a lot of people looking forward to hearing him. And I'm not surprised because we have the co-founder of ConSol Partners, Graeme Hubert, with me. And after sharing a previous podcast episode with Mark Cohen, who is the other co-founder a few years ago, we decided that it'd be great to get the other half onto our show to talk about Europe and beyond. For those that have listened to our episode with Mark, you'll know that he led the growth in the US market. So we thought it'd be a brilliant idea to bring Graeme to talk about how he grew the rest of the business, particularly across Europe, but in total servicing clients in over 50 countries. So hello, Graeme. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So I'm the first on the Workwell Global Talk podcast.
You are first recruitment leader on our new Global Talk podcast. So very excited to have you on. Obviously, we brought a big star along.
Really get me out.
Just before we went live, Graeme was telling he's converted to a Mac this week and was raving about it, moving from a Windows laptop. We were having a little joke that whenever he moves his hands, sometimes emojis appears. So if you see thumbs up or hearts appearing on the screen, it's just probably Graeme being animated in the way that he talks. But Graeme, super excited to have you. Really appreciate you making the time to join the show. For those who don't know, Graeme built, scaled and exited ConSol Partners, which is a leading staffing firm, growing it from inception with zero external investment up to $150 million in revenue over 8 years, with offices in London, LA, Boston and Austin. Over that time, they served customers in over 50 countries. They delivered statements of work, contract, permanent and RPO services to hyper-growth tech companies. Today, we'll talk about this a little bit later on. He is, you can find him supporting many recruitment businesses either at board or executive level, in helping staffing companies navigate growth, scalability and expansion. So he really is the perfect guest to have on today. But we have got so much to work through in the next 26 minutes. But as our conversation progresses, if you have a question that you'd love either myself or Graeme to answer, we are more than happy to answer those live. And you can ask them by simply commenting in the chat or comment section. And we'll do our best to answer as many as we can without distracting us from the agenda set before us. If we don't get time to answer your questions, do not worry because we will come back to you after the episode is finished. So that's the introductions over. Hopefully, Graeme, I served you well there in describing your success up to this point. But it would be really great if we could just dive straight into what it looks like to build a global recruitment business and certainly under that an international contract book. So I suppose my first starting point really to understand from you is, you and Mark very much took a divide and conquer approach with Mark going over to the US, and we've heard lots about that story. What drove you both to make that decision, i.e. Mark focus on the US and you on the Europe, and how successful do you think that was for you?
Yeah. Well, Mark actually spoke about this in great detail just a week ago on a podcast he did with Sean Anderson of Hoxo. So I would say if you want the detailed story through his lens, go and check that out. It's a really, really good hour and a bit deep insight into Mark's journey and how he started. So I won't go into too much detail, but we when we started ConSol, we started to be international, not domestic UK, so international clients and candidates. And Mark had previously lived in the US, had been a green card holder, had been very, very successful in North America. So as we were expanding, most of our customers were in Europe, and the logical place would have been to go to Europe. But we felt that America was probably a bigger, bolder, more risky decision. However, I felt that with Mark's experience, we just had to go to America. So he was surprised when I rocked up one day, and he'll talk about this in the Sean podcast, when I rocked up one day to our office in Moorgate, which for those of your listeners are not in England, is in the city, the heart of the city of London, and said, I think you should go and live in California and open an office for us in California. And he was like, what? Absolutely, I'm going to go. So check that out. But outside of that, if you think about it, that move to the US, we'd already were international, and it really kind of mirrored our expertise quite well. So my background, I'd built contract businesses and contract desks mainly in Europe, and had a lot of experience around there. And Mark had a lot of experience of building large scale project-based perm staffing projects, committed spend, retained projects, and in the US. And so we really complemented each other in terms of building a global business. But the backdrop to this, Amy, is when we started the company, we'll talk openly about it, that we started the business to exit. So we wrote in our original business plan that this business was being built to return shareholder value. And when you think about the move of Mark going to the US and me running Europe, from an investor's perspective, we knew that would be highly attractive from an investor's perspective. We had access to an office, a business that was in the largest staffing market in the world, in America, run by a co-founder, and another office that had a substantial hundreds of contract book in Europe, a big contract market run by another co-founder. And we felt that was really powerful. But ultimately what it did, with coming back to that view of what was the goal of the company, was it gave us a really powerful hedge. So we were hedged in terms of our business, in terms of our service offerings. By the time we kind of got to the end, we were 70% contract in the UK, 30% perm, and the US was all perm. But across the group, we were 50-50 contract and perm. We were then hedged by territory, UK, Europe, and US. And we had a brilliant hedge in our tech markets at the time, where hyper growth. It allowed us to achieve the strategic goal of where is the company going, what do we want to achieve, and our purpose.
I was just going to say, Graeme, often a lot of conversations that I have with recruitment leaders, when they're talking about expanding to other markets, and we've spoken about it many times on this podcast, is about understanding and knowing your strategic goals up front, and how that international expansion or that country or route to market links back to the strategic goals. And I think that absolutely is fundamental to your success with Mark, is you start out as you want to finish, and you had the finish line in sight as you started out. And I think often, and probably a lot of people who become a little bit disillusioned with the UK market, certainly in the last few years, and have looked to international, it's really understanding what are we strategically trying to achieve, both medium and long term, before you make any key decisions. So it's so refreshing to hear you talk about that. Now, I know you had contractors across 55 countries at one point. Now, there's kind of twofold, kind of what I was talking about. There's the business development element of growing a contract book across multiple countries, but there's also then the compliance across the different regions. So do you want to talk to me about how you managed both of those things?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard because coming back to that goal, the purpose of mine and Mark's purpose, our driving force, was we knew that we had to build contract, but we didn't want to build contract for kind of runners out for margin's sake. It has to be a sustainable business that was compliant. Yeah, we knew at the time, when the time came to exit and we went through due diligence, that would be unpicked. And so having a compliant book was absolutely crucial. And then also, not only that, having the right commercial terms with our clients was really important. So we couldn't have client terms in big contract customers that were heavily weighted or stacked in the client's favor. So those two challenges are really tough to navigate when you've got...
Not sure what you did there.
Those two challenges are really tough to navigate when you've got a sales team, a sales engine that is trying to win contract business.
Yeah.
The BD to win contract business. It's not easy. It's a really tough sell, particularly if you're trying to break big global enterprises. And they're winning a contract roles with X company, coming back and say, I've got roles, got CVs out, I've got interviews, here's the terms we need to sign. And ultimately that came across my desk and I'd be saying, we're not signing these terms. There's no chance. And that's a really, really tough place to be, because here you are trying to lead and grow a sales team, a sales engine. Our business was a sales engine, but trying to balance compliance and being commercial. So it's not easy to do at all. Yeah. The answer, how we did it, the answer was really about being able to educate the stakeholders. So educate our sales consultants as to why it's important to get really strong, robust commercial terms and compliance solutions, and doing the same with clients as well. So being able to engage with customers, procurement directors, and say, these are the things that are important, and ensuring we got those. So there were 5 things for me that when it came to engaging with new customers and agreeing commercial terms for contract was, number 1 was ensuring that we specifically looked at capped liabilities and warranties in client contracts. So capping a liability and warranties in a client contract was a non-negotiable. If something goes wrong whilst a contractor's on site, the client can't turn around and say, well, that's gone wrong, here's a $50 million lawsuit. That becomes important. So non-negotiable, number 1. You will know this: supervision, direction, and control wording. So anyone that's done contracts or run contract business will understand that. Deemed employment risk that comes alongside that. Those people aren't really interested in that. They just want to get runners out. But that's, crucially important when it comes to having a compliant, clean book. Timesheet clauses. There's a 3rd non-negotiable for me, because ultimately, if you're going to fund the book and you're going to expand a contract book, it's cash intensive. You're going to have an invoice partner or a finance partner sitting behind you. You need to be able to have a really good, robust timesheet clause to collect your money. Direct engagement clauses was the 4th one. That was a non-negotiable for me. You can't take our contract book. We've got 50 contractors on site. They cannot be moved to a new supplier tomorrow, which is why we didn't do hardly anything. I was racking my brain before this thinking, did we work through any RPOs? And I don't think we did. Maybe 1 in our entire life cycle. We turned it away because that's part of their business model. And the 5th one was payment terms. So payment terms were really, really important, and being able and prepared to say no, or at least give something up on return for those 5 key things. Yeah,
I love that. Your 5 non-negotiables, and they render so true, actually, in, some of the conversations I have, every day. Just from when we think about because you've got the commercial acumen and the commercial appetite of the business to grow, and then, you're constantly balancing that risk. So those 5 non-negotiables are so practical for our listeners. They're great. Why, or, how important actually were those things, Graeme, when it came to exit? So as you got to that finish line and the goal that you guys had in sight, can you articulate for our listeners what that did for your enterprise value?
Yeah, there was no ability for our purchaser to chip. There was no, because it was so, and all the stuff that we'd set in motion early. I mean, we were a small company. We were already thinking about these things. There's no price chip based on anything that came out and you did it.
Yeah.
That was the sole reason. And those tough conversations that we were having where our customers, we need to agree these terms, and you push back some can't, because we had one goal in mind. One of the tools that we had to help educate sales teams was we created rules of engagement for every territory that we operated in. Okay, we had rules of engagement. If you want to place a contractor in Dubai, here's the pack. Here's the flow, workflow, the things that you need to follow to be compliant. If you want to do something in Sweden or Austria or Benelux or wherever it was in the world, we had rules of engagement. And during our due diligence, those were like big ticks. And the quality of our documentation was off the scale. And the purchaser looked at some of that stuff and ended up using some of that stuff as well. So,
brilliant.
It would have been easy to slam contract deals in. I said we weren't trying to grow a book for margin's sake. We were trying to have a quality book.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously I've sat with clients as they've gone through events similar, obviously to you and Mark, and just the buyer always wants to understand, what is your process? How is that documented? Also, how's that scalable, obviously, for a separate kind of tick? But then how are you mitigating risk through those processes and documentation? So again, love that rules of engagement for every territory that you operate in. Really clear for your consultants to know the boundaries with which they're able to sell in services, either to contractors or equally to clients, because there's still a talent conversation to always be had with the contractors around setting their expectation as well as then obviously the upfront conversation with the client. So again, I think that's another brilliant practical piece of advice.
Yeah.
Okay, if we could just talk about kind of the European market generally, in terms of your experience. One of the things Mark always spoke about, and we speak about quite regularly with America, so I kind of want to ask this question of Europe. In America, we know having a niche proposition or a niche solution is really important. Mark will now call it niche because he's officially American. So we have a little chuckle over that. But we're in the UK, so we're going to say...
I think it depends on his audience. He's good like that.
But for when you think about that, so having a niche solution for clients across Europe, how important is it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Mark and I were absolutely agreed on from the very beginning, because our careers followed this, was to be super specialist and very, very niche. So we had that as a philosophy between the two of us. And when it came to, for all the reasons, why that's a benefit, I won't go into all of that stuff. So when it came to business development, absolutely that was important. However, that is slightly different for contract, because for contract, our strategy was to absolutely be niche and lead with candidates to break into big, large, either big users of contract from a tech perspective, or big consultancies or big enterprise organizations. It is important to, once you're in, because if you're winning a contract customer, a big contract customer, once you're in, you need to expand. So once we were in with some of the big contract users, we definitely became a little bit more generalist for contract. For perm, not so. So there's a different strategy there. For perm, we were really super niche. For contract, once we were in, it was a breakthrough for us to be able to understand the land. And so there is a slight subtle difference here for contract and perm.
Yeah. Brilliant. And then just thinking about how you grow your presence across Europe without a physical office. How did you find that?
It never not having a physical office in Europe never held us back. It didn't stop our growth. So we didn't find for us at that time that was a challenge for us.
Yeah.
I think we hadn't have completed our deal in the timescales when we did. Maybe an office in Germany or
with licensing requirements. Yeah,
Germany
slightly in the last few years, definitely.
Yeah, Germany would have been the one. And actually, post deal, we did establish a GmbH, but just it wasn't us doing it; it was the purchaser did it. So I think if we hadn't completed that exit, we'd have been in Germany to change the model. Our strategy was tech verticals, tech experts, rather than territory.
Yeah.
So we were really looking at skill sets and tech skills across multiple territories and jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So having an office wasn't important. What was important was getting out and meeting customers. So that was the big thing. So getting face time with customers was absolutely crucial, and meant we probably didn't need that office in X central location. So that in itself presents challenges and opportunities. Initially, when we started doing more travel, it was quite an exciting thing. And like our salespeople, our consultants would want to go, wow, I'm going to Germany, da, da, da. But then they soon realized that, that's 2 days out of the office and, that might hit my pipeline, or can I really afford to be out of the office? And the answer is absolutely yes, get out of the office. And we found that after our initial strategy of let's push more travel, when travel dropped, we had to find ways of ensuring we got that back up. And one of the big tricks, my tactics to do that was we had an upturn in client travel when I incentivized my directors in their quarterly MBO bonus to make sure you do client travel. So funny enough, travel creep, because we know that to build trust, high value client engagements, you have to get face time to expand those relationships. And so we had to find triggers to be able to do that after a period of time to make sure our salespeople are out in front of customers.
So getting out, so you don't need your advice is, apart from any sort of licensing requirements that exist today, it can absolutely be done from the UK without a physical office, but it's still intrinsically important that you get out face-to-face time with all of those clients.
Yeah, I think I would say that's a generalization. Yes, there are some territories where you have to be here. For example, here, everything in the Middle East, everything is done face to face.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing business in the Middle East, I think it's very difficult to build trust and longevity without physical presence here. I think so. I think there's some nuances, but as a general rule, it didn't limit our growth by not having a physical presence.
Yeah. And business culture is so important because it does vary, dramatically, never mind country by country, region by region, it can vary dramatically, and really understanding that is so key to a business development strategy. And one of the things that I often talk about is don't think what worked in one country is going to work in another country or even in another region within the same country. You've got to research and understand your markets and how people do business to be key in terms of winning.
I think it's crucial.
Yeah, brilliant. Cool. What would you summarize as being your main challenges in scaling across Europe specifically?
I think there's a skill set that you need to have. I think one of the things you just touched on is understanding the complexities of how different countries or cultures work is absolutely crucial if you're going to embark on. If you're a domestic focused staffing company, regardless of what country you're in, you want to go international, I think understand cultural differences is really important, as you touched on. Well, if you're working with Belgians, they're going to prioritize compliance. If you're focused on Scandinavians, consistency and delivery is really important. Germany, compliance. The Dutch, I think we weren't that successful in the Dutch market because I think the Dutch need to know that you're there. You're embedded, you're there. It's a long-term play. I think you probably need to have a physical presence or at least spend a lot of time in the Netherlands, Middle East and Africa. You have to be here. So I think, having an understanding of cultural challenges is really important. I think knowing compliance, as we talked about, is really, really important. And I think having resilience and a solutions mindset, you will know suddenly you're working in a new territory and you got to understand the complexities or the regulatory frameworks. Just being able to jump into that is important. One of the things that came up for us early doors was we were doing some business in Norway. And one of the compliance checks that came out was registering with Norwegian tax authorities. And I think we were doing a small number of deals, say 5 deals. And my thing was we got registered with Norwegian tax authorities. It was an F card, it was called. I know it's still called an F card. So we went through this process like, really, do we need to register with Norway? Why would you do that? It's 5 runners. We did register with the Norwegian tax authorities. And 5 years later, we got a letter from Norwegian tax authorities with an investigation. And we were able to kind of pull out our F card and say, we're fully compliant. And doing it that way is really, really important, particularly for contracts. Right.
I think sometimes it can be overlooked when you're doing it from the UK, how much actually applies to you where you're generating revenue from other countries. So that expertise is so important to protecting the overall risk of, I call it the mothership, the actual home company that you run all of this through, is to really understand that and make sure you don't overlook how important it is.
And then I think that what's important on that, Amy, as well, is obviously a lot of things we did for the first time, by the way. Like we didn't have knowledge of Norwegian tax authorities, but what we could do was surround ourselves with experts.
Yeah.
Surrounded ourselves with the likes of you guys, or people that had the knowledge that we didn't, so you could learn and then speak from a position of authority to our clients or candidates, because our expertise was finding and delivering candidates in a compliant way, but we weren't compliance consultants.
Well,
talk about it.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. You're absolutely right. I always talk about being an alien in a new market. You know nothing, so you have to learn it. And actually, where I find the most successful firms are the ones that train their consultants to sell through knowledge and compliance, so that you make the end hirer feel safe. And a lot of these end hirers who are engaging talent across multiple countries do have nervousness around how the compliance is managed. So I think if you can be front foot with that, it becomes an opportunity rather than an objection to handle further down the line. Yeah.
I'm learning that here in the Middle East. It's such a vibrant, fast moving environment here. There's so much investment here that compliance is absolutely important, and doing it from a position of knowledge and value as part of the
of course. Value creation.
It's really, really important. Deep out.
Definitely. Okay, we're going to come on to our last topic, which is leadership. And Often again, when I'm speaking to recruitment firms who are opening up new markets and where, they may be physically open an office, the land and expand model, they'll say, Amy, what's the one piece? If you had to give me one piece of advice, what would it be? And I would say it's the leader. Whoever is leading that expansion or that growth, they have to be completely competent and somebody that can do that for you and is strategically in mind as well. So I suppose, you've done that. You've been that leader. You've developed leaders up within the organization as well. So from your perspective, what skills does a leader need to develop to drive international growth for their business? Big question.
Yeah, really good question. And how much time have you got? 4 minutes?
We can do it. Come on, Graeme.
I think that as a founder, there's a couple of things that you need to do. I think one of the things that Mark and I did from the very outset was have a philosophy which is around being world class and thinking like a big company. You think about a lot of things that I spoke about. Even when we were a small company, we were behaving like a big company and being world class. I emphasize this a lot with the companies that I work with now, which is everything from a world class perspective, and it stands you in a really good stead. So absolutely, that's key. We talked a lot about compliance, so you just have to tick that compliance box. And one of the things that Mark and I are really, really passionate about is future facing markets. So I think those would be the key things. I'd add, if you're a domestic company looking to move external, there's an element around BD, which is understanding that when you're doing BD for the first time into international markets, it's the same thing. Right? It's clients and candidates. What we used to find is we used to recruit or interview recruiters that had only worked the UK market and be really excited about working on potentially in Germany. And our thing is the same thing. It's just exactly the same process. It's just a mindset that's slightly different. So I think you've got to simplify expanding internationally and doing BD internationally for what it really is. And that, I think, stands you in good stead. And then really knowing your market.
Yeah.
I think being an expert and knowing your market becomes really, really, really crucial.
Yeah. Are there any key learnings from your experience that you'd want to share?
One of the key things I would say would be to surround yourself with experts. Surround yourself with companies or people that can plug the gaps in your knowledge so that you can learn. So when Mark and I started the company, we appointed an advisor pre-launch. We had the best accountants and lawyers, and we had invoice discounts, and we didn't have any contractors. So, but that was about being world class and having the infrastructure that meant that we were serious and world class from the get go. So the one piece of advice, I would surround yourself with people that have the answers or have done the journey or can support you in the way that you need to. So partner piece is really, really important.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, you already mentioned the Middle East. I know you're in Dubai now. You relocated there, and I've heard that, heard how you ended up there. I know you're really happy and thriving there as well. But what are you doing? How are you spending your spare time? And how could you potentially support our listeners?
I'm lucky because I'm great. I feel grateful and lucky in that the companies, I work with a small number of companies that I do advisory for, and they were all really supportive with me coming out here. So I still work with those companies to help them to, what it started out was to scale, and then the last 2 years here. And it's really about kind of working through those companies. And so sharing knowledge, experience, helping, being an advisor. Often it's being a big brother to the company and to the founders. So I'm really love working. I'm at a stage in my career, Amy, where I just love sharing knowledge. Like, I'm probably the most content that I've been. So I just love working with great people and helping them to scale or grow or work through challenges. So, if there's something that might need some help or some advice, just happy for anyone to reach out to me on LinkedIn, whatever. And happy to try and help. But yeah, I'm doing that. And just what's also happening out and beautiful weather it's about.
I look forward to them days where I'm where you are, Graeme, definitely. But for now, Graeme, we've covered so much in such a short amount of time. But before we wrap up, I wanted to ask if there was one piece of kind of one out of everything you've said on today's session, what's one thing you want everyone to walk away and remember? I've got loads that you've said that I've already made.
I would say there's a lot in there, but I would say be world class. I'd be world class in everything you do. And I think that generally stands you in a good stead and lots can flow off that.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that. Be world class from the very beginning. Okay, well, that's a wrap on today's session. We did get one question, unfortunately, that we'd already moved on, so I didn't bring it on. So, Graeme, what I'll do is I'll introduce you to the person that asked it. It was around being niche, so that we can follow up on that. But if you're excited by what you've heard and you want to understand more from Graeme, then please reach out directly to him on LinkedIn, as he's already advised today. Workwell Global, we are one of the experts that Graeme speaks about. We help recruitment firms understand international markets, really understand that compliance piece as well. And we can help engage or employ workers in over 80 countries on your behalf, which gives you a scalable solution. If you'd like to talk about how we can support you with that, then you can access a QR code at the end of this session that'll be up on the screen. Next month, we've got another great guest and we're excited to release details of that soon. So keep your eye out for that. Other than that, I just want to say thank you, Graeme, again. You've been a brilliant guest and so authentic. And I know our listeners will have got so much from it, as I have as well. And thanks everyone for listening. Take care and goodbye.